Every noble rejected the scarred alien princess, until one human saw her beauty. The grand royal palace of Celestra shimmered like a living crystal under the twin moons. Its prismatic spires rose toward the sky, each crystalline tower refracting soft light into 1,000 colors. Inside those gleaming walls, Princess Lyra of the Cyrians moved like a silent ghost through opulent halls, her ceremonial robes flowing behind her. Layers of iridescent fabric fell in careful folds. An ornate mask covered the left side of her face, hiding what most of the Alliance whispered about but never dared mention aloud. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. Above the grand hall, bioluminescent orbs drifted lazily across the ceiling, casting soft waves of color over the gathering below. Nobles from 17 different star systems clustered in glittering circles, their clothing and jewelry practically screaming for attention. This diplomatic summit of the Galactic Alliance was supposed to be a celebration of unity, of peace and cooperation between powerful civilizations. It was also, for Lyra, something far more personal and far more terrifying. Tonight was meant to be her formal introduction to potential suitors. Among the Salon royal houses, these alliances were critical. Marriages weren't about romance. They were about treaties, military cooperation, trade routes, and political stability across multiple star systems. An heiress to the crystalline throne was expected to be perfect. Perfect posture, perfect manners, perfect luminescent skin that told a flawless ancestral story. Lyra adjusted the edge of her mask with slender, trembling fingers. 3 cycles had passed since the attack that changed everything. 3 cycles since a bioweapon struck her instead of the Emperor. The healers had saved her life, but they couldn't restore the glowing, symmetrical light patterns that marked her royal bloodline. The left side of her face now bore jagged scars and shattered bioluminescence. In her culture, it was more than disfigurement. It was a broken lineage. She stood beside her father at the front of the hall as conversations died down. The herald stepped forward and lifted his staff, his voice ringing through the massive chamber. The Emperor approaches with the princess. The sea of nobles parted with choreographed grace. Emperor Turun moved with the calm authority of someone who had led fleets and signed peace treaties that affected billions. At his side, Lyra walked with perfect posture, every step measured, every breath controlled. The ceremonial mask that hid her scars was crafted from rare metals and studded with priceless gems. It was beautiful, admired, praised, and yet everyone in that hall knew why it existed. Distinguished representatives of the Alliance, Emperor Turun's voice boomed, amplified by delicate sonic tech woven into the walls. I present my daughter, Princess Lyra of Celestra, heir to the crystalline throne and future guardian of the 7 systems. Tradition dictated that this was the moment suitors would step forward, nobles from powerful houses, each eager to secure a royal bond. Lyra felt every eye on her, felt the weight of expectation press against her like gravity. And then, nothing. The silence stretched just a little too long. Conversations didn't resume naturally. They swelled back in forced waves, like people pretending nothing awkward had happened. The Emperor's expression remained dignified, but Lyra saw the tension in his jaw, the faint flicker in his luminescent patterns. At the edges of the room, near the less decorative walls and hidden maintenance panels, a human man pushed a cleaning cart along the polished floor. Blake Turner kept his head down, just as he'd been instructed. The cleaning company he worked for had won a high-profile contract to maintain the summit venue, and Blake had been assigned to the royal palace itself. He was 32 years old, a former office-building janitor from Chicago, who now found himself on an alien world, in an alien palace, surrounded by beings whose technology and history made humanity look like it had just finished crawling out of the ocean. 2 years ago, he'd been scrubbing floors for late-night office workers. 2 years ago, first contact with the Galactic Alliance hadn't even been a rumor. He watched the hall from the corner of his eye while pretending to wipe down a refreshment table. He couldn't understand all the political implications, But even he noticed when the emperor introduced the princess and nobody stepped forward. Finally, a tall, blue-skinned noble, his clothing smooth and flawless, broke the silence. "Emperor Turan," he said, voice rich with practiced diplomacy, "while we hold the highest respect for the Salon Empire, perhaps this is not the ideal moment for such introductions. The matters of this alliance summit require our immediate attention." Blake didn't know all the customs, but even he recognized a polite rejection dressed up in fancy words. The emperor's face hardened for barely half a heartbeat before smoothing back in a neutral formality. "Of course, Ambassador Vex. We shall proceed with the scheduled discussions." The crowd flowed back into motion, pretending nothing unusual had occurred. Somewhere in that carefully choreographed movement, Princess Lyra slipped quietly away from her father's side, heading toward a quieter balcony that overlooked the capital city's crystalline skyline. Blake finished polishing a row of glasses, but his focus had shifted. Years of being invisible in the background had turned him into an expert observer. He'd seen that posture before. The rigid spine, the careful way someone turned their face away, the subtle slump of a person holding in hurt until they were alone. He'd seen it in himself after his own accident, when burn scars had marked his right arm and people suddenly didn't know where to look. He shouldn't leave his route. The instructions had been very clear. Stay unobtrusive, stay efficient, stay out of the way. But the sight of the princess standing alone on that balcony tugged at him in a way protocol couldn't override. Blake parked his cleaning cart near a doorway where it wouldn't be in anyone's way, straightened his simple uniform, and stepped through the archway leading to the open terrace. Princess Lyra turned sharply at the sound of footsteps, surprise flooding her luminescent eyes. For a second, Blake thought some invisibility field made her genuinely immune to anyone approaching her. "Forgive me, Your Highness," Blake said quickly, bowing with the best approximation of courtly respect he could manage. "I didn't mean to disturb you. I can leave if you want." "You are one of the Earth delegation?" she asked, her voice carrying a soft, melodic tone that even the translation device hovering near his collar couldn't fully flatten. "Not exactly," Blake said with a half-smile. "I'm just the janitor." Lyra tilted her head slightly, lights sliding across the jewels of her mask. "Janitor. This term is unfamiliar." "I clean things," he explained, gesturing back toward the hall where his cart waited. "Floors, tables, glassware. I keep the place looking nice, while important people like you run the galaxy." Her eyes narrowed in quiet curiosity instead of offense. "Yet you approach a royal princess directly, human janitor. Your species is new to the Alliance, but even humans must understand the idea of protocol." Blake flushed with embarrassment. "I probably shouldn't have, to be honest. But you look like you could use someone to talk to. Someone who isn't part of—" He waved a hand vaguely toward the glittering hall. "All that." Lyra turned back toward the city, its crystalline towers catching the light of the twin moons. For a heartbeat, he thought she'd dismiss him. Then she spoke. "Your observation is correct, Blake Turner of Earth. These gatherings are challenging." Blake moved to stand beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "Too many people judging your every move." "They judge far more than my words," she answered quietly. Her fingers rose unconsciously to the edge of her mask. Blake glanced at the intricate covering. Unlike the decorative face pieces he'd seen on other Cyrian nobles, this one had a different purpose. It didn't complement, it concealed. "Is that why none of them stepped forward?" he asked before he could stop himself. "Because of whatever's behind that mask." Lyra's visible eye widened. "You noticed that?" "Kinda hard not to," Blake said. "Look pretty rude, if you ask me." A sound escaped her, not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh. "You truly do not understand our customs. They were not rude, human. They were practical. No noble house wishes to bind itself to damaged goods." The phrase hit him like a punch. "Damaged goods," Blake repeated, frowning. "They call you that?" "Because of scars." With a slow, deliberate motion that made his breath catch, Lyra reached up and released the clasp of her mask. She lowered it, revealing the left side of her face. On the right, her skin was the smooth, pearl-like surface typical of her people, glowing softly with delicate, swirling luminescent patterns that moved under the surface like living constellations. On the left, those patterns were shattered. Raised scar tissue twisted across her temple, cheek, and jaw, breaking the once symmetrical glow into a jagged, interrupted map. 3 cycles ago, she said quietly, I was caught in an attack meant for my father. A dissident group deployed a bioweapon specifically designed to disrupt Cyrian cellular regeneration. The healers saved my life, but they could not restore the damaged bioluminescent pathways. What you see is permanent. Blake didn't flinch away. He let himself really look, not just at the scars, but at the person wearing them, at the strength it took to reveal them to a stranger from a distant world. And that's enough for them to decide you're unworthy, he asked. In Salon culture, our luminescent patterns reveal our ancestral story, she said, voice steady with the weight of practiced explanation. They're our history and our proof of a strong bloodline. A royal with broken patterns is considered a bad omen, a flawed future. Blake pushed up his sleeve, revealing the burn scars running from his wrist to his elbow, uneven patches of tissue, twisted and shiny in places where the skin had once blistered and peeled. On Earth, he said, scars mean you survived. Kitchen fire. I was 19, working in a restaurant. Oil flare-up went wrong. Doctor said I was lucky it wasn't worse. Lyra studied his arm, the irregular patches of healed skin. Your people do not reject you for this. Some people stare, he admitted. Some ask dumb questions. But most just see me. I still got jobs. I still live my life. No one decided I was cursed because of a bad day in a kitchen. He met her gaze, feeling how fragile and important this moment was. For what it's worth, Princess Lyra, I think you're beautiful, scars and all. The glow in her patterns flared. A soft flush of light he'd learn later was the Cyrian version of blushing. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The palace felt far away. The summit, the nobles, all of it faded until there was just a human janitor and a scarred alien princess under twin moons. Then a distant voice called her name, echoing from the hall. Lyra replaced her mask with practiced ease. I must return. My father will be searching for me. Of course, Blake said, stepping back. She paused at the threshold, glancing over her shoulder. What is your name again? Human janitor. Blake, he said. Blake Turner. Blake Turner, she repeated, his name soft and musical in her accent. Thank you for your candor. It is rare. She disappeared back into the hall, swallowed by the crowd of nobles, ambassadors, and power brokers. Blake stayed on the balcony a moment longer, staring at the moons, replaying her words, and his, over and over in his mind. He had no idea that simple sentence, "You're beautiful," had just changed the trajectory of his entire life and the future of the Galactic Alliance. He returned to his work, pushing his cart around the edges of the Grand Hall as the summit continued. He scrubbed surfaces and polished glassware while overhearing fragments of conversations about border tensions, trade routes, and advanced technology exchanges. The human delegation negotiated eagerly, trying to pull Earth out of its technological infancy and into the interstellar age. Near the end of the evening session, Blake was cleaning near a refreshment station when he heard an official inform the Emperor. The princess has retired for the evening, Your Majesty. The Emperor's shoulders slumped barely an inch. Very well. See that she is informed. We will continue discussions regarding alternative diplomatic arrangements tomorrow. Blake focused on his work, not expecting to be noticed at all. So when Emperor Turan turned and addressed him directly, it felt like someone had pointed a searchlight at an ant. You are from Earth, the Emperor said. Blake nearly dropped his polishing cloth. Yes, Your Majesty. Sorry, I don't know the right title. Emperor is sufficient, Turan replied. His luminescent eyes studied Blake carefully. You spoke with my daughter earlier this evening. Blake's stomach clenched. Yes, Emperor. On the balcony. I'm sorry if that was against protocol. I didn't mean any disrespect. What is your function here? I'm a janitor, Blake said. Maintenance staff for the summit. I'm just here to clean. Yet you approached a royal princess directly. I saw she was alone. Blake said honestly, nerves burning under his skin. She looked like she needed someone to talk to. someone who wasn't expecting anything from her. The Emperor was silent for a long, heavy moment. "Tell me, human, what did you think of Princess Lyra?" Blake swallowed and decided, again, that honesty was his only real weapon. "I think she's remarkable, intelligent, strong, and I think any noble who refuses her because of a few scars is a fool." The Emperor's patterns flickered. In surprise, maybe, or something like it. "You know of her condition, then?" "If you mean the scars, yes," Blake said. "She showed me. Voluntarily, I think. I didn't pressure her." Taran's eyes narrowed in thought. "My daughter has not willingly revealed her scars to anyone outside our immediate family since the incident. Not even to the royal healers without persuasion. And yet she chose to show them to a human janitor she had just met." Blake felt suddenly very small and very out of his depth. "I didn't realize that. I just said what I meant." "What exactly did you say?" "That I thought she was beautiful," Blake replied. "Scars and all." The Emperor of Celestra, ruler of 7 star systems, stood silently studying a man whose job was to scrub floors. Is this the customary human reaction to physical imperfection? "Some humans are jerks about scars and differences," Blake admitted. "But most of us understand they're just part of life, part of a person's story. They don't decide someone's worth." The translation device took a second to process the word jerks, but Taran seemed to catch the meaning. An interesting light came into his eyes. "An intriguing perspective," he said. "One that differs from many established alliance cultures." "Blake Turner of Earth, I thank you for your honesty regarding my daughter." He turned away, summoned back to the swirling center of galactic politics, leaving Blake standing there with a cleaning cloth in hand and a racing pulse. When the summit's evening session finally ended, Blake finished his duties and prepared to head back to the tiny room assigned to staff. He was securing his supplies when a royal attendant approached, checking a device. "Blake Turner?" "That's me," Blake said, bracing for a reprimand. "Your presence is requested tomorrow morning at the royal residence. A transport will collect you at 7th bell." "Wait, what? By who?" But the attendant had already turned away, moving with efficient, royal-trained speed. Blake stared after him, bewildered. As he walked back to his quarters under Celestra's alien sky, one thought hammered in his mind. Blake slept badly. Every time he drifted off, his brain dragged him into fresh nightmares about accidentally causing an interstellar incident. In one dream, he stepped on the Emperor's robe. In another, he leaned on the wrong wall and triggered a planetary defense system. By the time morning came, he felt like he'd run a marathon on a treadmill of anxiety. He put on his cleanest uniform, smoothed down his hair, and tried to remind himself to breathe like a normal mammal. When the transport arrived, it was impossible to miss. Sleek, reflective, and obviously expensive, hovering just above the ground with soft, controlled hums of energy. Other human workers stared as Blake climbed in. He could practically feel their thoughts. What did he do? Is he in trouble? Is he getting fired? Is he about to be vaporized by alien royalty? The ride to the royal residence cut through Celestra's capital, towering crystalline buildings, floating platforms, and light flowing through structures like liquid. The city felt like a mix of glass, starlight, and advanced science fiction architecture that human engineers would spend centuries trying to copy. The royal compound sat separate from the diplomatic center, grander, more secluded, and heavily guarded. Blake was escorted through a maze of corridors, each more ornate than the last, until they reached a garden that looked like a dream made of light. Crystalline plants grew in strange, elegant shapes, refracting illumination in shifting patterns across the ground. Princess Lyra sat on a curved bench in the center of the garden, wearing simpler formal clothing than the night before. Instead of a full mask, a light veil covered the scarred side of her face, soft fabric catching the glow of surrounding crystal leaves. "Blake Turner," she said as the attendant announced him and quietly withdrew. She gestured toward the bench opposite hers. "Thank you for coming." He bowed, almost overdoing it. "Your Highness, I didn't know I had a choice." Her luminescent patterns brightened faintly. "True, I apologize for the abruptness of the summons." He sat, trying not to fidget. "So, Is this where I find out I accidentally insulted half the galaxy and get shipped back to Earth in a cardboard box? If you had caused a diplomatic disaster, Lyra said calmly, you would not be sitting in a garden. Comforting, Blake muttered, relaxing a fraction. Then why am I here? You spoke with my father last night, she said. He, in turn, spoke with me. He spoke to me first, Blake corrected automatically, then winced. Sorry, still working on my filter. Lyra's eyes sharpened with a trace of amusement. Your lack of filter is one of the reasons we are having this conversation. Blake stared blankly. That sounds like the opposite of a compliment. In my world, she said, people craft their words like weapons, each sentence sharpened and polished for political effect. You spoke to me, and to my father, with honesty rather than strategy. That is unusual. Where I come from, Blake said, talking around a problem usually just makes it worse. She inclined her head, acknowledging the point. My father has been trying for 3 cycles to secure a political marriage for me. Each noble house has declined politely, strategically, but declined all the same. My scars are not the only reason, but they are a major one. Blake's jaw tightened. I still think that's ridiculous. Ridiculous or not, it is reality, she replied. However, your reaction to my scars, and your straightforward view of them, intrigue my father. Humans have a different relationship to imperfection, to survival, to value. Blake frowned. Is this the part where he asked me to give motivational speeches to alien nobles about not being shallow? Not exactly, Lyra said. He wishes to propose a cultural exchange. Blake blinked. Between you and me? Yes, she answered. He would like you to serve as my human cultural advisor for the remainder of the summit. Blake choked on absolutely nothing. I'm sorry, you're what? Cultural advisor, Lyra repeated, as if assigning janitors to princesses was a normal Tuesday activity. Earth is the newest member of the Alliance. There is considerable curiosity about your species. My father believes that your perspective, untrained, unpolished, unfiltered, might be uniquely useful. I'm a janitor, Blake said, stunned. I don't even own a tie on Earth, and now I'm supposed to advise royalty? That is precisely why you were chosen, Lyra said. You are not a diplomat saying what others expect to hear. You are inconveniently honest. Blake ran a hand through his hair. I don't know anything about galactic politics. You know how to see people as more than their surface, she said quietly. In this palace, that may be more valuable than memorizing protocol. He hesitated. Do I still have my regular job? Because I kind of need that income, and I doubt the Emperor hands out direct deposits in Earth currency. Your employer has been compensated, Lyra said. You are released from cleaning duties for the duration of the summit. If you accept the position, your needs will be provided for. Back on Earth, Blake had a tiny apartment with peeling paint and a fridge that made suspicious noises. He'd taken this alien contract hoping to send money home, catch up on bills, and maybe, one day, do something that wasn't cleaning bathrooms at midnight. This wasn't the future he'd imagined, but it was definitely more interesting. What exactly would I be doing? He asked. Accompanying me to diplomatic functions, Lyra said. Offering your human perspective when asked. Helping me understand your people. And perhaps helping the Alliance understand that worth is not written solely on flawless skin. He exhaled slowly. I can't promise I won't say something dumb. As long as it is honest, she replied, it will be useful. He laughed softly. All right then, Your Highness. I'll do it. Her patterns brightened, just a little. Then your training must begin immediately. Within hours, Blake found himself in front of a mirror, wearing clothing that felt like it belonged in a high-budget space opera. The outfit was a deep shade of midnight blue, with subtle geometric patterns that echoed salon design without copying it. The fabric shifted with his movement, adjusting temperature and fit as though it were alive. A royal tutor named Veril, tall and precise, walked him through the basics. Remain precisely 2 steps behind Her Highness in formal settings, Veril instructed, pacing beside him in a practice hall mocked up to resemble a reception area. Do not speak unless addressed. When you are addressed, respond concisely. Bow to this depth only. He demonstrated. Any lower implies subservience inappropriate for an official advisor. Any higher is disrespectful. How am I supposed to remember the titles for 17 star systems? Blake asked. You are not, Varel said dryly. You will wear this. He handed Blake a nearly invisible earpiece. I will supply you with essential information as needed, Varel added. Think of it as a teleprompter for your social survival. So you'll be feeding me lines, Blake said. Great. I've become a badly prepared actor. I will provide context, not a script, Varel corrected crisply. The Emperor values your authenticity. He does not, however, wish to trigger a diplomatic incident because you used the wrong honorific. By the time evening came, Blake's brain felt like a cluttered hard drive. But as he stepped into the new reception hall beside Princess Lyra, dressed in her shimmering ceremonial attire, he had to admit, this beat mopping floors. Lyra's outfit tonight was a dazzling cascade of crystalline elements that shifted with her movements, catching and refracting light like splintered rainbows. Her face was partially covered again, the veil or mask adjusted depending on the occasion, always hiding the scarred side from public view. You look different, she said, gliding over his new attire. Good different, or what disaster did the tailor commit different? Blake asked before thinking. Her patterns brightened faintly, more aligned with your new position. The hall filled quickly with dignitaries, music, and the low hum of translated voices. Blake could feel curious gazes on him, especially from a human delegation, who clearly had not expected to see one of their own walking behind an alien princess in royal-approved clothing. Ambassador Vex approaches from your left. Varel's voice murmured into Blake's ear. Zenithian, fifth-tier noble, traditional greeting is a shallow bow with right hand at sternum. Blake followed instructions just as the tall, blue-skinned ambassador from the previous night arrived. Princess Lyra, Ambassador Vex said elegantly, then turned his attention to Blake. And a human attendant. How novel. Blake Turner serves as my cultural advisor, Lyra corrected smoothly. Earth is our newest alliance member. My father believes their perspective valuable. The ambassador's eyes lingered on Blake. Indeed. Tell me, human cultural advisor, what insights do you offer regarding tonight's trade negotiations? Panic flickered behind Blake's forced calm. He hadn't been briefed on trade at all. Before he could open his mouth and accidentally invent a new tariff system, Lyra stepped in. Mr. Turner's advisory role focuses on cultural and social context rather than economic policy, she said, though I'm sure he would confirm that mutually beneficial exchange is a universal ideal, even on Earth. Absolutely, Blake added grateful. Where I'm from, bad deals don't last long. Vex watched the two of them with obvious curiosity. How diplomatic of you, Princess. I look forward to seeing what human perspective brings to the alliance. When he moved away, Blake exhaled. Sorry, I should have been ready for a trade question. Do not worry, Lyra said softly. He was attempting to test you, not truly seeking your opinion. The Zenithians like to probe for weaknesses. Well, he found one, Blake muttered. My complete lack of galactic economics. Or, she countered, he found that I will not allow you to be easily cornered. That, too, is a message. As the evening unfolded, Blake encountered more strange and fascinating beings. A representative of the Luminari Collective whose crystalline body floated around a core of swirling energy. Insectoid diplomats from the Vespid Dominion whose speech patterns clicked rhythmically, and a representative whose skin shifted between shades of green as she spoke. Your species has adapted quickly to its place in the Alliance, Lyra observed at one point as they watched the human delegation work the room aggressively. With a new kid in a school full of honor students, Blake said, if we don't make friends fast, someone might take our lunch money. Her translator paused, then rendered, a reference to youth hierarchies based on social dominance? Yeah, Blake said with a small smile. Exactly. And yet, came a new voice, melodic and layered. Your pragmatic approach may be precisely what this alliance needs. Blake turned to find a Luminari ambassador regarding him thoughtfully, the crystals around its energy core glinting. Your species' rapid technological advancement defies standard probability models, the ambassador said. We got lucky, Blake replied. Found some ancient alien tech in our solar system. It gave us a jump start. Luck, the ambassador mused. A concept the collective does not fully recognize, but perhaps one we must now consider. They moved through conversation after conversation, Lyra gliding through the hall with royal fluidity, Blake trailing her and dropping human metaphors into an ocean of alien politics. He was still wildly out of his depth, but he was learning. At one point, Lyra leaned closer and spoke quietly. I should warn you, Ambassador Crax of the Vespid Dominion has expressed interest in acquiring you. Blake almost choked. Acquiring me? They maintain what they call living cultural archives, Lyra explained. Individuals from various species who serve as representatives and conversation pieces. So, like pets, Blake said flatly. An oversimplification, she said, but not entirely inaccurate. I informed the ambassador that you are under Imperial protection and not available for acquisition. Good, Blake muttered. I bruise easily, and I don't fetch. Before they could joke further, a disturbance rippled through the room. A cluster of officials gathered around a holographic display, their expressions shifting from interest to concern. Confirmed attacks at 3 outposts, an officer said, voice bordering on alarm. The hegemony denies involvement, but the evidence. What evidence? Demanded a reptilian diplomat. Border regions are chaotic by nature. You jump to conclusions. Emperor Turon's voice cut through the growing argument. This reception is not the chamber for such debate. The Security Council will convene tomorrow. The crowd pretended to settle, but tension lingered like static in the air. Blake leaned toward Lyra. What was that about? Incidents along the outer reach, she said quietly. Several Alliance outposts have reported attacks by unknown forces. Many suspect the Trasserai hegemony. The hegemony isn't part of the Alliance, right? No, they're a neighboring power with a long history of tense relations. Direct conflict has been rare until recently. The idea that he might be standing in the middle of a gathering where the first whispers of an interstellar war were starting made Blake's chest tighten. He finished the night with his head buzzing from names, threats, and a growing sense that the galaxy was much less stable than the polished hall suggested. His upgraded quarters that night came as another shock. No more cramped staff room. Now he had a private chamber within the diplomatic complex, complete with adaptive bed, environmental controls, and a communication device he barely understood even after Veryl's half-hour explanation. As he lay down, the mattress adjusting perfectly to his body, one thought wouldn't leave him alone. 5 days ago, he'd been an invisible janitor. Now he was a cultural advisor to a scarred alien princess who hid her face from the galaxy, but had shown it to him. And outside, somewhere along the border of Alliance space, something dangerous was waking up. The next morning began with an avalanche of information and not enough coffee. Veryl appeared just after dawn, carrying a tablet of glowing symbols and a schedule that looked like it could crush a small starship. The Security Council will convene shortly to address the Outer Reach incidents, he explained. You will not be attending that session. Your presence will be required this afternoon at the Cultural Exchange in the Eastern Pavilion. Cultural Exchange sounds less like "we might be coming" and more like "here's my favorite painting," Blake said. A simplistic summary, Veryl sniffed, but not entirely wrong. It is a less formal setting where worlds display art, music, and cultural achievements. Significant alliances, however, are still formed there. Before that, Blake had a private breakfast scheduled with Princess Lyra in a smaller dining chamber of the palace. He arrived to find her already seated at a table laid with both familiar and alien dishes. A holographic display floated in front of her, dissolving as he entered. She wore a lighter veil again, revealing more of her natural patterns while still shading the most heavily scarred area. "Good morning, Your Highness," Blake said, executing his practiced bow. "Good morning, Blake," she replied. "I trust your upgraded accommodations were acceptable." "Let's just say my mattress back on Earth is never going to feel the same," he said, "though I might have almost frozen myself by hitting the wrong temperature control." Her patterns brightened faintly. "The environmental systems can be sensitive. I will ask Veryl to provide you with simpler instructions." Servants arrived silently with plates and carafes. Some foods looked like earth fruit. Others wobbled, glowed, or changed color depending on temperature. Blake took cautious bites, pleasantly surprised that most of it tasted good. "You seem distracted," he said after a few minutes. "More than usual royal-level distracted." Lyra paused, then set down her utensil. "The Security Council session today is critical. The incidents along the outer reach are more serious than what has been publicly acknowledged. You think it could turn into a real war?" Blake asked. "It is one possibility." Her voice stayed calm, but the light patterns across her neck shifted with subtle tension. The Trasserai hegemony has grown increasingly bold. Yet recent attacks do not entirely fit their established tactics. What doesn't fit? "There have been unusual anomalies in space near the affected zones," she said. "Sensor disruptions, strange energy signatures, communications interference. Phenomena that do not align neatly with hegemony technology. So, weird space activity plus mysterious attacks equals everyone scared and pointing fingers," Blake summarized. "An oversimplification, but yes. What does your father think?" "The Emperor must weigh many perspectives before announcing any position," she replied, her tone drifting toward trained diplomacy. "The Salon Empire has often urged patience when others call for immediate retaliation." Before Blake could press further, a messenger entered and bowed. "Your Highness, the preliminary briefing has been moved forward. Your presence is required." Lyra rose instantly, regal composure sliding back over her like armor. "I will attend." She turned to Blake. "You will remain with Veril this morning. He will prepare you for the afternoon cultural exchange. Please attempt to avoid any unexpected adventures." "I'll try to be the most boring human alive," he promised. Spoiler, that did not happen. After breakfast, Blake wandered the public areas of the diplomatic complex with his security pass, taking in the gardens and architecture. The complex was designed to host multiple species comfortably, different atmospheres in sealed wings, gravity adjustments in certain halls, and even water channels for aquatic delegates. He watched the human delegation from a distance, noting their determined energy. They looked like people trying very hard not to look desperate, shaking hands, exchanging data, pushing for tech and trade agreements. Earth needed this, needed allies, needed a place at the galactic table before someone flipped that table over. "You appear lost, human," a melodic voice said behind him. He turned to see a tall being with shifting green skin and large, faceted eyes. The translator labeled her as Lady the Lease of the Arboreal Conclave. "Not lost exactly," Blake said, bowing politely. "Just exploring while I have some free time." Blake Turner, cultural advisor to Princess Lyra. "Ah," she said, "the former maintenance technician." "Let's go with career-pivoting human," Blake said. "A most unusual appointment," she observed. "The Salon Royal House rarely engages in such unconventional staffing. What perspective do you offer regarding the current tensions with the hegemony?" Blake recognized a probe when he heard one. "I'm still catching up on hundreds of years of interstellar politics," he answered carefully. "But from what I understand, jumping to conclusions usually leads to someone regretting it later." "A cautious answer," the Lease said. "Perhaps your people have more wisdom than some would assume." Before the conversation could deepen, Blake spotted Ambassador Vex approaching from the opposite direction, his expression shark-like in its interest. Not in the mood for another subtle interrogation, Blake smiled politely at the Lease and excused himself, drifting toward a quieter section of the complex. He found himself in an area where the decorative architecture transitioned into something more functional. Here, the hallways curved around maintenance access points and service doors, the polished glamour thinning slightly. That was when he saw them. A figure in plain clothing, not the elaborate garments of delegates, not the crisp uniforms of staff, moved with focused purpose down a side corridor. Their posture screamed, "I'm trying not to be noticed," which was exactly the wrong thing to do around someone who had spent a decade invisible in the background, watching everything. Blake followed at a distance, curiosity mixing with a twinge of unease. The figure stopped at a service entrance, glanced around, then pulled out a device and pressed it to the security panel. "Hey," Blake called before his brain could vote. "You're not supposed to be doing that, are you?" The person spun around. Their face did not match any species he recognized. Grayish skin, hairless scalp, eyes too large and too dark, with no visible pupils. For a split second, shock flared across their features. Then they bolted. "Seriously?" Blake muttered and sprinted after them. They tore through maintenance corridors Blake instantly recognized as the kinds of spaces he'd cleaned in other buildings his entire adult life. Hidden infrastructure, pipes, panels, storage rooms. The intruder moved fast, but clearly didn't know the layout. Blake, powered by adrenaline and stubbornness, kept up. They turned a corner and hit a dead end. The intruder whirled, pulling a small device from their clothes. It glowed ominously in their hand, and certainly didn't look like a flashlight. Blake raised both hands slowly. "Okay, let's not do whatever you're planning with that. I just want to know what you're doing here." The intruder spoke rapidly in a language his translator couldn't parse. Whatever they said, the tone was clear, not friendly. "I'm guessing you're not here for the cultural exchange," Blake said, keeping his voice calm. "Look, how about we both pretend we never saw each other, and you stop trying to melt that door panel?" Footsteps echoed from behind him. Security was coming. The intruder's eyes flicked past Blake toward the approaching sound. Their jaws set. They raised the device, pointed, not at Blake but at the ceiling, and fired. The beam cut through the overhead panel, showering the corridor with shards and debris. Blake threw himself sideways, coughing as dust filled the air. By the time he got his bearings, the intruder was gone. Security stormed in, weapons drawn. "What happened here?" a senior officer demanded. "There is someone trying to bypass that service door," Blake said, heart still pounding. "I followed them, cornered them here, and then they blasted the ceiling and ran." "You followed them?" the officer repeated, incredulous. "Through restricted corridors?" "I didn't know they were restricted," Blake said defensively. "I saw someone doing something shady with a security panel. What was I supposed to do, just walk away?" "Yes," the officer said bluntly. "You're a cultural advisor, not security. Next time, contact us." Verrill arrived shortly afterward, looking like someone had told him the protocol manual had been shredded. "Of all the ways you could involve yourself in palace security," Verrill said once they were alone, "you chose the most dramatic and least appropriate." "There was someone breaking in," Blake protested. "I reacted. You risked your safety and potentially compromised an ongoing security operation," Verrill replied sharply. "The complex is layered with surveillance and defense systems. You are neither needed nor authorized." Even as Verrill scolded him, he still handled the formal report process with professional efficiency, ensuring Blake's account was logged and that the incident's potential fallout was managed quietly. By the time they were finished, it was nearly time for the cultural exchange. "The princess has been informed of your activity," Verrill said. "She has instructed that you remain at her side during the event. At all times." "Yeah," Blake muttered, "that sounds fair." The Eastern Pavilion was breathtaking. A vast, open structure with a living crystalline ceiling that flowed and shifted based on ambient sound and movement. Within, each Alliance member had a section set up: art, holographic displays, live demonstrations, instruments, cuisine, interactive exhibits. Blake found Lyra near the salon display, where living crystalline sculptures responded to music by changing shape and light. She wore a more substantial covering again, fully masking her scarred side. In the private garden, she'd revealed more of herself. In public, she retreated behind perfection. "I hear you had an eventful morning," she said without preamble. "I didn't go looking for it," Blake said. "I just saw someone trying to hack a door." "The security division has investigated," Lyra said carefully. "They found no evidence of an unauthorized presence at the panel you described." "That's impossible," Blake said. "I watched them use a device on it. Then they ran. Then they pulled what I'm pretty sure was a weapon." Lyra's eyes sharpened. "A weapon?" "Yes," he said. "Small device, glowing, pointed it right at me before shooting the ceiling instead. That detail was not in the preliminary report. They might have glossed over it while they were busy lecturing me." Lyra's patterns shifted, reflecting genuine concern. I will make sure this information is added. In the meantime, please remain close. The cultural exchange may seem informal, but politics and danger rarely respect labels. They moved together through the pavilion, stopping at different displays. Human culture took up a modest corner. Music streaming from speakers, art panels, a demonstration of early spaceflight, some VR experiences. Next to gravity-manipulating sculptures and energy-sensitive crystal art, Earth's contributions still looked small, but not insignificant. Your species creates much with limited tools, Lyra observed as they watched a recording of a human orchestra. There is beauty in how you stretch what you have. We've had a lot of practice making something out of not much, Blake said. Emperor Terran joined them halfway through the event, surrounded by a subtle ring of guards who pretended not to be obvious. The Emperor's eyes scanned the room, the ease in his posture undercut by an undercurrent of tension. Blake Turner, he said, turning his attention to the human. I understand you reported a security incident this morning. Blake straightened. Yes, Emperor. I saw someone trying to access a service entrance with a device. When I confronted them, they ran. I followed. They pulled something that looked like a weapon and shot out the ceiling to escape. Describe this individual, Taran said. Humanoid, but not like anyone I've seen here. Grayish skin, no hair, eyes too big, no visible pupils. Plain clothes, not like any of the diplomatic styles. The Emperor exchanged a meaningful look with one of his advisors. Your initiative was unorthodox. In the future, you'll contact security rather than pursue unknown intruders yourself. Understood, Blake said. However, your vigilance is noted, Turan added, especially given current circumstances. Then he moved on, leaving Blake with the uneasy feeling that whatever he'd stumbled into wasn't a random trespasser. Lyra watched her father go. The Security Council has been discussing possible infiltration attempts at various Alliance facilities, she said quietly. Your report complicates and perhaps clarifies certain patterns. You think what I saw is connected to what's happening at the border? It is too soon to claim that, she replied. But within diplomatic circles, coincidence is rarely trusted. As the exchange continued, the human ambassador, Chun, approached with a warm smile and sharp eyes. Your Highness, she said, bowing to Lyra, then nodding to Blake. Mr. Turner, your new appointment has generated considerable interest among our delegation. I'm still getting used to it myself, Blake said. A powerful symbol of interspecies partnership, Chun suggested diplomatically, and perhaps an opportunity to deepen cooperation between Earth and the Salon Empire. Lyra answered smoothly. Blake Turner's insights have been valuable. However, individual advisors do not replace formal diplomatic channels. Of course, Chun said, smile never faltering. We look forward to exploring all appropriate avenues of collaboration. As she walked away, Blake leaned in. She was trying to use me as a shortcut, wasn't she? A natural strategy, Lyra said. Earth is eager to secure strong allies. The Salon Empire is a desirable partner. And how does the Salon Empire feel about humanity? Blake asked, trying to sound casual. That, Lyra said with a faint smile, is still under discussion, though your presence has shifted the conversation in interesting ways. Before he could ask what that meant, security personnel entered the pavilion, moving with controlled urgency. They went straight to the Emperor, speaking in low tones. His patterns dimmed slightly. Within minutes, attendants moved through the hall, informing guests that the cultural exchange would be ending early due to scheduling adjustments. Something's wrong, Blake murmured. Very likely, Lyra agreed. They were escorted back to the royal residence, where heightened security was impossible to miss. More guards, more scanners, more tension vibrating in the air. In Lyra's private reception chamber, away from prying eyes, she dismissed her attendants and turned to Blake. Then, with deliberate motion, she removed her veil entirely. There's been an incident at one of our primary relay stations, she said. All contact lost. The final transmission mentioned an unauthorized boarding attempt. The hegemony? Blake asked. Unknown, Lyra said. The corrupted data shows technology inconsistent with any known power in this region. Blake sank into a nearby seat. An intruder I saw this morning? Security found no trace, she said. But my father has ordered elevated protocols across the capital. Your report, especially now that we know about the weapon, carries weight. So my word does matter, Blake said quietly. It does, she replied. More than you may realize. He studied her bare face, the scars, the unhidden glow of her remaining patterns. What happens to my cultural advisor role if this becomes something bigger than politics? My father believes diverse viewpoints are even more valuable in times of crisis, she said. Your position remains, unless you choose to withdraw. It was an option. He could step back, let trained professionals handle everything, ask to be reassigned to simple, safe cleaning work, or even request a trip back to Earth. It would be the rational, self-protective move. Instead, he heard himself say, I signed on for the summit. I'm not leaving just because things got dangerous. That's when you need people the most. Lyra's patterns brightened, soft and strong. I am glad, she said. The days ahead may require more courage than any of us anticipated. The next morning, the schedule Verrill handed to Blake looked slightly shorter, but far more intense. Several large events had been canceled or merged. Others were moved deeper into the palace, where security was tightest. The princess has requested your presence at the morning briefing, Verrill said. This is highly irregular. You will not speak unless addressed. Let me guess, Blake said. If I accidentally start a war, you get to tell me I told you so. Correct, Verrill said without a hint of humor. The briefing took place in a chamber far within the palace, a secure communications center where walls pulse softly with embedded holographic interfaces. Representatives from key alliance members lined a circular table. Emperor Turan stood at its head. Lyra sat near him. The human ambassador was there too, clearly surprised when Blake was stationed behind Lyra's chair. The Emperor activated the central display. A holographic map sprang into existence, showing red markers along the border regions. The situation has escalated, Turan said without preamble. 3 additional outposts report anomalies consistent with the Tyranny's relay incident. Emergency protocols have been enacted. They await further instruction. An admiral with a severe expression leaned forward. The pattern suggests calculated probing of our defenses. But the method remains inconsistent with hegemony technology. Perhaps it is a third party, Ambassador Vex suggested. Someone attempting to spar conflict between the alliance and the hegemony. Motives are irrelevant without proof, another representative argued. What matters is that our infrastructure is under attack. The anomalous energy signatures? Lyra asked during a lull. Have they been further analyzed? A Luminari representative replied, their multi-tone voice harmonizing. Our assessment indicates manipulation of forces at a level your science has theorized but never achieved. Space itself is being distorted locally, affecting sensors and communications. Whoever is behind this operates outside known parameters. The room buzzed with layered fear and calculation. Some pushed for immediate military escalation. Others insisted on investigation. A few advocated cautious silence, afraid of revealing weakness. Blake listened, trying to process a scale of conflict that made Earth's wars look like neighborhood arguments. Mr. Turner, the Emperor said suddenly, turning toward him. You have heard Earth's history of conflict. What is your perspective? Every eye in the room pivoted toward the former janitor. Blake swallowed. On Earth, when someone's testing your defenses, they usually don't open with their biggest punch, he said slowly. They poke the edges. They see how fast you react, where you're blind, how you communicate. It feels like whoever this is doing recon, measuring you before they commit to something bigger. A silence followed, broken by Admiral Corex. The human's assessment aligns with several of our tactical projections, he admitted. If these are tests, then the enemy is patient, strategic, and not the hegemony as we understand them. The hegemony is impulsive, brutal, and territorial, Ambassador Chun added, seizing the moment. This pattern resembles more calculated predation, or a scouting force from beyond known space. The words hung in the air, beyond known space. Emperor Terran studied Blake for a moment longer. Insightful, particularly from one without formal training. The human perspective may prove a valuable counterweight to our established assumptions. After the meeting, as delegates filed out, some gave Blake new looks, not as a curiosity trailing a princess, but as someone whose words had shifted the conversation. "You handled that well," Lyra said as they exited into a quieter corridor. "I was just thinking out loud," he said. "On Earth, small weird incidents usually turn out to be bigger than anyone wants to admit. Your planet's chaotic history may finally serve a positive purpose," she replied with the faintest smile. Not everyone was thrilled about his unique position, though. "Quite the trajectory," a human voice said later, as Blake stood sipping something that might or might not be coffee in a side hall. He turned to see a man with a military cut and the smooth movement of someone trained to notice everything. "Major Elliot Scott," the man said, extending a hand. "Earth Intelligence Liaison to the Alliance Security Cooperation Office." "Blake Turner," he replied, shaking it. "Former janitor, current cosmic imposter." Scott's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Your unexpected promotion has generated a certain amount of discussion back home. One moment you're cleaning floors, the next you're sitting in on classified briefings. Fastest rise in diplomatic history." "I didn't ask for it," Blake said. The Emperor insisted. "And you simply went along?" Scott asked mildly. "Representing human perspective to one of the most powerful royal houses in the Alliance." "I'm not representing all of humanity," Blake said. "I'm just telling them what I think." "That's the problem," Scott said. "What you think now matters. To them. And to us. Information flows both ways. Earth needs to know what the Salon Empire is planning." Blake felt the trap closing. "If you're asking me to spy on Lyra, the answer is no." "Not spy," Scott said, still gentle. "Just share context. Observations. Little details others might miss. Those others include the person who offered me a chance to be more than the guy wiping up spills in the corner," Blake replied. "I'm not going to sell out her trust so someone can add a paragraph to a secret report." For a second, Scott's mask slipped, annoyance flickering in his eyes. Then it was gone. "Loyalty is admirable," he said. "I hope it doesn't cost Earth anything." He walked away, leaving Blake standing there with the uncomfortable awareness that he was now caught between his homeworld and the people who had given him a new role. Later that day, all representatives were called to the main diplomatic hall. The atmosphere was heavier than any reception so far. No music, no smiling small talk. Just tension. Emperor Tarun stepped forward. "Representatives of the Alliance," he said, his voice echoing. "We face a threat that does not respect borders or treaties. The destruction of the Tyrannies relay and the anomalies along the outer reach indicate a coordinated pattern. Evidence now suggests an actor beyond the hegemony or any known neighbor." The central hologram changed to show corrupted data, warped images, flickers of strange vessels that seemed half there, like reflections in broken glass. These transmissions suggest contact with an entity or faction whose technology manipulates reality at the structural level. The Alliance Defense Council recommends enhanced defensive measures and the creation of a special investigative task force. The next hours were a careful storm of politics. Powerful worlds argued for seats on the task force. Others insisted on shared control. Resources, fleets, research teams all became bargaining chips. Earth, shockingly, was given a seat. A junior seat, but a seat. Ambassador Chun hid her surprise behind practice calm. The decision said one thing clearly. Whatever was coming, humanity's strange history and fresh perspective were now valuable. As the session ended, Lyra led Blake out through the side corridors. "You see now why my father assigned you to me?" she asked. "Partially," he said. "He wanted an unpredictable piece on the board. And someone who sees scars as proof of survival rather than weakness," she said quietly. "That mindset may be what we need with this new threat." By evening, Blake was exhausted in ways he didn't know were possible. Diplomacy wasn't just speeches and signatures. It was constant observation, calculated silences, and conversations where every word weighed more than it sounded. In Lyra's quieter reception room, she finally allowed her shoulders to sag. With only him and a few trusted attendants present, she removed her veil and set it aside completely. "Today changed the alliance," she said. "We have shifted from internal competition to external fear. Some will see this as an opportunity. Others will panic. And you?" Blake asked. "I see it as a test," she said. "Not just of our defenses, but of who we decide to be when we are afraid." 5 years later, he would remember that sentence as the moment everything truly began. 5 years passed. The unknown attackers turned out to be an advanced scout force from a distant galaxy, operating through distorted pockets of space-time. They pushed against the Alliance's edges, probing, testing, trying to open stable corridors for a full invasion. The war that followed wasn't like Earth's. Battles happened across dimensions, in broken pockets of reality where ships fought shadows of themselves. But some things stayed the same. Fear, sacrifice, impossible choices, people deciding who they wanted to be when everything could fall apart. Earth brought something new. Unpredictable tactics, improvisational strategy, and a stubborn refusal to accept impossible as a final answer. Humanity had spent its entire existence adapting to chaos. Now, the galaxy needed that skill. The Salon Empire contributed crystalline technology, turning light, sound, and matter into defensive webs that could block the invaders' dimensional distortions. Together, human innovation and Salon precision created hybrid strategies that slowly, painfully, pushed the threat back. Through it all, Blake stayed at Lyra's side. What began as cultural advising shifted into something deeper, a partnership forged in shared danger and mutual trust. He watched her stand in war rooms and council chambers, scars uncovered more and more often, until one day she stopped wearing the veil entirely. She stopped hiding the broken, luminescent patterns. Her people watched their princess refuse to be defined by perfection, and slowly, cultural expectations began to tilt. Scars were still shocking, but they also started to look like symbols of survival, just as he'd told her on that balcony years before. When the final decisive battle ended and the invading scouts were destroyed, when the fractured corridors of twisted space collapsed and stabilized, the Alliance didn't just celebrate victory. It celebrated something new, real unity. A few years after the war, Emperor Turan stepped down. He had seen his daughter not only survive rejection and judgment, but lead united fleets against an impossible enemy. He had watched her people learn to accept their scarred heir as more than a symbol, as a leader. He ceded the crystalline throne to her, and, for the first time in modern history, the coronation of an empress with visible scars drew cheers instead of whispered disapproval. On the balcony where they'd first truly spoken, under the same twin moons, Empress Lyra stood beside her husband. No veil, no mask. Her luminescent patterns glowed proudly across both sides of her face. The scars didn't disappear. They traced through the light like rivers through a galaxy map. It was the anniversary of both her coronation and the Alliance victory. The capital's crystalline spires shone brighter than ever, a living city that had survived darkness and come out stronger. "Hard to believe it's only been 5 years since that summit," Blake said, leaning on the railing beside her, his diplomatic attire now as natural on him as his old janitor uniform had once been. "Back then, I worried about scuffing the floor. Now I worry about intergalactic politics." "Much has changed," Lyra agreed. Her patterns glowed warmly as she turned toward him. "For me, for you, for all of us." Blake glanced over her shoulder, where their daughter played in a nearby room under the watchful eye of a nurse and 2 slightly over-attentive guards. Half human, half Salon, the child's luminescent patterns danced across her skin in new shapes no one had ever seen before. "She's going to grow up in a very different galaxy," he said. "Yes," Lyra said softly. "One that understands survival is more important than flawless appearance. One where new bloodlines are seen as strength, not threat." Their marriage, the first between a human and a Salon royal, had been a shock at first. Old nobles muttered, complained, predicted disaster. But after the war, with so many worlds rebuilt by cooperation, their union became a living symbol of Alliance unity, scars, differences, and all. Ambassador Turner, the guard at the balcony entrance, called gently. "The Earth delegation has arrived for the anniversary celebration. Tell them we'll be right there," Blake replied. Even after everything, Ambassador Turner still sounded strange in his ears. Sometimes, when he woke up before dawn, he remembered pushing a cleaning cart along polished floors, invisible to everyone. He remembered burn arms, cheap uniforms, and overtime shifts no one thanked him for. Now he walked into rooms where entire star systems fell silent to hear what he had to say. He turned back to his wife, ready to go show everyone that a human janitor and a scarred alien princess can run part of the galaxy. "With you beside me," Lyra said, taking his hand, "I am ready for anything." They stepped away from the balcony and walked together down the long corridor toward the Grand Hall, where representatives from across the Alliance waited. Humans, Celans, Luminari, Arboreals, Zenithians, Vespids, and many more, all gathered, not just because they feared the next threat, but because they had learned to stand together. As they entered, conversations softened. Heads turned. The Empress with scars and the former janitor at her side moved through the room, fully aware that they were no longer just individuals. They were symbols of what the galaxy had become. Blake squeezed Lyra's hand. He remembered the first time he'd seen her standing alone on a balcony, hidden behind a jeweled mask, believing herself damaged goods. He remembered the moment he chose to see her as more than that, to say out loud what he truly saw. "You're beautiful." Those two simple words had brought down invisible walls, not just between them, but inside an entire civilization that defined worth by flawless light. In accepting the beauty within the scars, Lyra had reshaped her empire. In standing beside her through war and reform, Blake had shown the Alliance what humanity really offered, not just creativity and chaos, but stubborn compassion and the ability to see value where others saw flaws. It wasn't magic. It wasn't fate. It was one person daring to look past what everyone else judged and speak the truth. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to drop your feedback in the comments, positive or negative. It all helps us grow and bring you better sci-fi love stories with humans, aliens, and galactic drama. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel for more interstellar romance tales like this one, and I'll leave another video on the screen that I know you'll enjoy.